Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're very excited to be hosting this webinar, Resiliency in the Cloud, centered around the recent issue of TEKsystems quarterly publication Version Next Now, which shares well-informed perspective and real-world insights about the breakthroughs powered by technology and those willing to own change. My name is Sharon Florentine. I am serving as TEKsystems contributing editor for Version Next Now, and I will be your moderator today. Some housekeeping items we need to go through real quick. All of the lines have been muted upon entry. If you have a question regarding technical issues, please use the chat feature and send a message to the host. We'll try and get that taken care of as soon as we can. The Q&A option is disabled for this session. Again, if you need anything or would like to ask a question at any time during the presentation, use the chat feature to contact the host. At the end of the presentation, if you would please take a few minutes and complete the survey that will appear at the end of the webinar, we'd really appreciate it. And finally, this webinar is being recorded and will be made available shortly after the event has ended. So to start off, I'd like to take a moment to introduce TEKsystems. We're an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world applications, working with over 6,000 clients, including 80% of the Fortune 500 across North America, Europe, and Asia. In short, at TEKsystems, we work with progressive leaders to drive change. I'd also like to introduce OneStrategy, a TEKsystems global services company. It's an APN premier consulting partner focused exclusively on AWS solutions. They help businesses architect, migrate, and optimize their workloads on AWS, creating scalable, cost-effective, secure, and reliable solutions. OneStrategy holds AWS DevOps, migration, data and analytics, well-architected, and machine learning competencies. And now I would like to introduce our experts today. Leslie Deutsch is the Practice Director, Learning Solutions at TEKsystems, and Jen Doyle is the VP of Operations at OneStrategy. So I'm going to pass the mic, Leslie, if you want to take a few and tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Sharon. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Perfect. So happy to be here. Thank you all for joining. A little bit more about me. Leslie Deutsch, Director of Learning Solutions at TEKsystems Global Services. I've been with TEKsystems for more than 8 years, helping to innovate our approach to learning and development, partner with organizations across all verticals and industries, and ultimately set our customers up for long-term success on their digital transformation. I've worked within learning and development for 20+ years across all different industries, all focused around helping people achieve their professional goals and growth. I am based in not so sunny, pretty snowy today, upstate New York with my family, and really looking forward to today's session.
Thanks, Leslie. Jen?
Yeah, thanks. My name is Jen Doyle. As Sharon said, I'm the VP of Operations for OneStrategy. We are an exclusive AWS consulting partner for Amazon Web Services, and I've been with OneStrategy when I was about a little bit older than 1 year and have been kind of owning and growing the business since then until the company it is today. We have very excited, became part of the TEKsystems family about a little over a year ago, and have been partnering with great people like Leslie to bring our AWS expertise to customers across North America. I am based in Seattle, even less sunny than Leslie, and much more rainy there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. All right, so the most recent issue of Version Next Now deals with how organizations are using cloud-based solutions to drive change, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, which is top of mind right now, and how investing in the cloud can help businesses. Bold organizations, as we know, understand that speed, collaboration, innovation are all enabling are enabled at scale, by the cloud. And these businesses are migrating applications, they're deploying platforms to sustain operations, they're solidifying their resiliency and improving their customer service. And as you can see on the slide, 40% of IT decision makers report they're looking to the cloud to jumpstart their innovation as a digital platform. 35% of organizations identify the cloud as the tech that has the biggest increase in demand as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So Leslie and Jen, when we talk about digital transformation or moving to a cloud-enabled organization, what exactly does that mean? Leslie, you want to take that one right off the bat?
Sure, yeah. So I would say in its simplest definition, digital transformation is the use of new and emerging digital and cloud technologies to interact with your customers, to expand business, or improve your way of work. You can look close to home and in our daily life to see a couple examples of organizations that are digitally enabled. Starting with the banking industry, which has totally transformed processes that were once manual, very paper-based, or non-digital, to online or automated processes. As a consumer now, I receive and pay all my bills online. I deposit checks through my phone and the app, as these banking and banking institutions have gone paperless and digital. Haven't been to a bank in years, which is all possible as they've moved to a digital platform. Another example is within the retail space. Look at the major box chain stores that have moved to online shopping and delivery, which required those companies moving to the cloud and digitizing their processes and supply chain. Being digital created new channels to provide increased value to their customers and additional services. And again, I'm a testament to this, increased revenue that these stores are generating. You see the delivery trucks at my house daily. Can't remember the last time I went into one of those bigger box malls or shopping centers. Looking at an example within our work environments, even before COVID, distributed teams were using cloud-based collaboration tools for team communication, file sharing, or managing work. And there's the list of cloud tools that support that, enable that collaboration is endless. But during the pandemic, the need to leverage them has really only increased. And many companies were forced quickly to move their traditional on-site, co-located teams to remote. And these cloud-based collaboration tools allowed for that 24/7 accessibility and increased mobility for distributed team members across the globe. And cloud-enabled organizations using these have improved the way of getting work done by providing flexibility to their people where they want and to do their jobs from anywhere. And from a business results and productivity, the typical goals and metrics that you measure, business would measure on, they're being met. And we're also seeing an increase in morale, decrease in attrition by providing employees with a better way to balance their work and personal life. Jen, I'm sure you have a lot to add, especially around the technical and cultural debt that organizations, as they're addressing this and moving and going to the cloud, need to be factor in.
Yeah, of course. I mean, technical and culture debt is completely normal. Everybody has it. It's not something that is unique or new. It's really unique or new how you actually overcome it. And that kind of makes the difference between you staying stagnant or being able to adapt to the changes for the future. I mean, cloud services are the norm now and are growing incredibly fast. Any companies who are leveraging them are able to react to the market in such a quick and agile way that their competitors have not had the chance to take advantage of. I mean, services such as like Office 365 and Dropbox seem so normal to us now, but companies who were using them a decade ago were the ones on the cutting edge. And so we're at that same place now with the new kind of larger cloud services that are available in the last 5-10 years through AWS and GCP and Azure and all of those that we are just now starting to figure out what sort of capabilities they have to scale. But taking companies such like Netflix, that is one of the biggest users of AWS cloud services and was able to scale so quickly into reaction to just the demand of people moving off of cable network or the pandemic alone. I know Netflix is probably one of the biggest demands that happened, not just early on, but continuing going forward. And that's kind of the technical debt for them, was setting themselves up in the future and kind of addressing that. But the biggest thing is, when you have that technical debt and you are looking to move into a new service, don't take it with you. If you just kind of lift and shift everything over, you're just kind of postponing that, addressing all of that later, and you're going to have to eventually, you can't take advantage of the best services that are there if you're just going to postpone to next week to deal with it, or next year. You're going to have that same there. And so really setting yourself up for the future. It's not painless. A lot of companies are dealing with both cultural debt of either the business isn't supportive of moving forward, or a lot of people are reluctant out of fear or change or uncertainty on that side. But that is a lot of things that need to be addressed really well. No longer is making a lot of these moving to the cloud or digital transformation decisions stuck in just the technical side of the business. It's a whole business has to embrace this change, because it affects everybody, even just how you go about making your day-to-day decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points. And I feel like one of the big obstacles is with the issue of resilience, and that tends to trip organizations up, I feel. And obviously, the subject of cloud resilience has really become paramount since March. But it seems like some organizations were way better prepared than others, when the pandemic hit. So I would like to know what set those organizations apart. What did they do differently than their counterparts who maybe were struggling or even continue to struggle, months afterward?
Yeah. The biggest differentiator early on in the stages were companies that were already utilizing cloud services. They were able to support shift to remote workforce, to be able to scale elastically, incredibly quickly, either up or down, to meet markets for the demand, both physically and geographically, of areas that they didn't see before. Market trends changed for every industry. There wasn't a single industry that wasn't affected by the change, not just early on, but throughout the last few months and last year. Companies who were able to take advantage of these cloud services were able to really quickly either scale back and cut costs where they needed to when they saw a decrease in their market, or scale incredibly quickly to meet those spikes in demand as well. These are the kind of companies that early on were able to accommodate the new needs that they had for their employees or their customers, their business needs. A really great example is like e-commerce companies who Amazon is in Walmart and all of the big box stores are the ones who were able to meet the demand. We moved so much of our shopping virtually and online, and we're able to really quickly scale for those demands, which a lot of the smaller businesses weren't having that same sort of capability. That company that really relied on in-person sales or their staff all being in the same office together were the ones who really were hit the hardest and really struggled on it. And those that had a hard time shifting that. So many companies right now are doubling down on cloud strategies, social media and just media entertainment alone. Disney Plus is doing now where you can watch TV shows with your friends who don't live with you and have that capability to just do a lot more virtual interaction. And the social side has really been the companies that have been able to succeed and really meet market demands in a different way, which I'm sure Leslie can give some great examples of how so many industries and specifically their workforces are being impacted right now on just the changes that this virtual demand has been causing.
Yeah, definitely, Jen. I smiled when you were talking about Disney Plus and the family feature, which I love. We've definitely used that. But there are a couple examples that pop up in addition to the ones that you mentioned as the most kind of drastic shifts and in transformations that really needed to occur. to move their consumers this year during the pandemic. And the theme with those, I feel is that the why they needed to virtualize and the why they needed to move to the cloud was very clear and immediate. First one is healthcare industry and the utilization of telehealth or telemedicine, which is not a new trend, but the increased and urgency of the need for it during the pandemic has transformed patient care experiences and the standard of healthcare. Virtual healthcare is being leveraged more than ever now and may be a permanent fixture in the future. But because of social distancing and public health safety measures, virtual healthcare was introduced and leveraged to consumers by way of necessity. So they had to make that move. It will continue to increase as more patients prefer to take advantage of these digital channels to connect with their healthcare provider from the comfort of their own home. There are a variety of different cloud-based tools out there that are being used for telehealth, and we've seen challenges from many providers as their doctors, nurses, and staff are learning how to quickly use them, integrate them into their workflows, into their existing systems, while maintaining that high quality of service. The other area that has been forced to leverage cloud technologies very quickly with everything with COVID is within education. Both in the K-12 and higher ed, the pandemic has created major disruption in how they traditionally deliver the classroom experience. And leveraging those EdTech cloud-based technologies has been a large shift for educators, parents, and students. I'm having 2 kids going through this right now. I've witnessed the challenges firsthand, and it isn't from a lack of tooling or online tools to help educators to leverage, but the challenge is how do they use those cloud tools and capabilities and maintain the student engagement. We know nothing's going to replace live classroom, and these EdTech systems are allowing educators to provide that online environment and work through the challenges of supporting that classroom and engagement as they move forward.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on the lack of engagement. The technology's fantastic, but keeping them in the seats. Absolutely. So if organizations are struggling right now, what practical tips would you offer to help them catch up, so to speak? What can they do to make sure that at least they're not falling further behind in this environment?
Yeah, Jen, I can take that one first. I think if organizations are struggling or feel the need to catch up, they can turn their attention and jump in and start with their people. A lot of organizations focus on just the technology side or the promises that technology will provide, but it's really the people and the mindset for change that also need to be a priority in your strategy and your roadmap. As with most things, start with a plan and strategy and ensure your leaders have clarity on the goals and the direction, and give forum and space to discuss issues openly and what needs to be done, where do they have concerns. Senior leaders really need to equip their middle managers with the tools and the plan to rally their teams and create that sense of urgency that people can latch on to build their mindset for growth, learning, and change. Any good kind of roadmap or strategy that you put together, needs to have that component that focuses on training and developing the skills of the people for the teams to leverage in these new tools and new ways of work. In addition to that, I think leaders can really look and instill that growth mindset and continuous learning culture. Leaders, we have to manage differently now. We have to lead differently now. We need to be resilient, as we mentioned earlier, to navigate the unknowns. And establishing that trust with your team, that together you'll work through the problems that you'll face on the journey, because there will be them. You will hit challenges. With that clear definition of the goals and the strategy, it'll allow your leaders to experiment and learn from one another. On that resiliency piece, Sharon, that you mentioned earlier, key to any successful transformation, and an example of resilience is grit, which if you guys haven't read Angela Duckworth's book, I would highly recommend. She describes grit as passion and perseverance to see failures and challenges as learning experiences. And that resilience and grit is really key for seeing through the challenges and struggles through a cloud transformation. Jen, from your perspective, what other tips did I not hit on here?
Like let's say, having a plan and the buy-in from not just the business, but the technical stakeholders is incredibly key. Focusing kind of on the immediate business needs as a whole is what's really important to be able to adapt for unpredictability. I mean, scalability, security, costs, those are all things that are some of the biggest concerns for people, not just now, but always have been. And being really intentional about the efficiency and the agility of your future as you do either start to leverage new cloud services or even trying it for the first time, making sure you're setting yourself up to be able to change with the future as well is incredibly important. And it's one that is really making you set up for your success in the future. But that buy-in from having the business support that as well, like a lot of change is attitude, and the buy-in from not just the people who have to implement it, but the people who are the ones who are now taking that solution and doing that step to grow it in within the business. I mean, there's all the technical sort of tips that I would say, like leveraging containers. That is one that allows you to be able to really deploy applications in a secure and repeatable environment. And it's so great for people who are new and struggling to migrate because it allows you to set it up once the right way, securely, and in the way that you need it, and repeat multiple times across wherever you need to scale very quickly in the correct way once instead of doing it manually every time, and who knows how many mistakes that one time can result in. Probably the most boring tip, but the one that honestly resonates not just on the technical side, but every side, is if it isn't documented, it doesn't exist. Especially now that we're in such a virtual workforce, if we don't have somewhere that's documented, it's not really easy to get that told to anybody, or anybody even know that it's been done. We no longer have that luxury where we can overhear what others are working on or just chit-chat in meetings and things like that. We're now really dependent on documentation, and it's pretty much things are happening way too fast and way too much in silos because of that more remote workforce that we are super dependent on it. And I've seen entire projects fail because of documentation.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it really seems to come down to pretty much back to basics, foundational stuff, right? People, culture, that mindset for change, as you talked about. So what are the barriers, maybe some more specific barriers to adoption, and how can you encourage your people to overcome those?
Yeah, I mean, obviously all decisions are harder or easier based on the support and attitude towards change. And that really does come from the leadership of both business and technical and sales and all different aspects of your company. And having a company culture that prioritizes cloud-based solutions as kind of the natural choice instead of the one that is that hill you have to climb on makes it so much easier. If it's the default choice, it's one that you are able to just set that attitude towards others, and it makes it no longer the thing they have to push for or have to convince others of. That makes a really big difference because it's no longer just the IT department or owners making those decisions. It's really the business as well, since they are moving so much of the infrastructure and the complication of maintaining your services into AWS's or GCP or Azure or any cloud provider's hands. You are able to be a lot more user-friendly to less technical stakeholders. And so it has to be a lot more decisions in their hands because they're the ones who are now going to be utilizing and really driving the results of what comes from this. And people resist change. It's new technologies automate so much of our business that there's a lot of fear that your job is going away or your role is becoming obsolete. So it's really important for the leaders and the teams to be very transparent about where your path is going. Modernization does have a huge impact on morale. And if you are very clearly communicating your plan and the ability and showing them those areas of growth and capabilities to scale and escalate their career, make a really big difference in having that buy-in from not just leadership pushing this idea, but those who actually have to go do the work and do the implementation, being excited about it and wanting to do it. And Leslie, I know you can give so much more insight on that, especially in the development of skills and those challenges that a lot of the workforce and team members are going to face as they adopt new cloud technologies.
Yeah, I definitely agree, Jen. And, I think across the board with many of the organizations that we work with, there is that skills gap. There is that expertise gap. And the skills companies need to transform. They're not enough to go around. And so a common problem faced by organizations, is not being able to hire, identify, and onboard technical talent fast enough in these new and emerging technologies. And organizations are responding in a variety of ways to create programs, provide opportunities to their current employees, as well as creating new avenues to develop a pipeline of talent for their organization. The skills requirements, the different technology areas are going to continue to evolve, and so will the skills of your team. And so, to ensure that the required skills and competencies will overlap, really assessing your employees kind of where they're at currently, map out the required and kind of future-facing skills you need, and then build a training and development program that closes those gaps. Organizations that succeed in really focusing on development and developing future forward-looking digital and cloud skills will find that learning and development is really a powerful and strategic advantage in remaining innovative and competitive in the future of work. And depending on the roles on your team, the skill depth within those different competencies are going to vary. And, really kind of spending the time to map the roles and functions across your enterprise or across your team and looking at that current state provides your team a mechanism to, evaluate where they are today, look at where they have gaps, and then really kind of build their own kind of path to that needed career development for future roles. And as you start that journey, provide a sandbox environment for your teams. Provide places for your teams to experiment and test their skills as they're learning more and more. Formal training is great to build foundation and reinforce, but your teams really need a place to apply and practice those skills.
So it really seems like a little bit of bottom-up and a top-down kind of initiative here, right? So how do you get, buy-in from below and the leadership from the top? And I know we've touched on this a lot through the presentation, but, if there's anything else to add on these points, that'd be great.
Yeah, I would say a lot more need now is for the kind of top-down buy-in for these, having a leadership set a really clear path and clear goals around where they're moving is incredibly important. It's no longer allowing restrictions on what your infrastructure that your technical team can maintain. It's now more limited on what can your business do and support, because the infrastructure is not limitless, but way more vast than pretty much any company can embrace with cloud services. It allows you to grow and scale without bounds in a way that a lot of smaller and large enterprise companies didn't have that capability before. They were restricted on what infrastructure their team could maintain, and that's no longer so. And so it really needs to be set from the bigger strategic, large, big picture kind of things from leadership, going down to saying like, hey, here is where we want to grow as a business. We have the capability to maintain this. And so that is becoming really important for a clear vision of saying where the business is growing, because we're no longer limited by technical infrastructure.
Yeah, and I would agree, Jen, and add to that, part of that top-down driving of that change is including growth and learning plans and development into that to really kind of move and change the culture and the team. Leaders and middle managers driving that change are so critical to the success. So I would, add into when you're building out that cloud strategy and rolling it out to your leaders and your teams, leverage the wins and the advantages that the transformation and the modernization is going to bring, and feed those back in your organization to drive growth and to celebrate your wins, learn from your failures. That experimenting as a team, really helps when you're trying to kind of roll out either top down or bottom up, failing fast, learning from those failures, and where to improve and grow together as a team, I think is really big in building that resiliency to bounce back, when you do hit a roadblock or a challenge, and how leaders are going to guide those teams going forward. We found that, the really agile and highly adaptive organizations that we work with, they do this well and have commonalities that their leaders kind of use when they're pushing and driving these different initiatives. They have alignment. They have that buy-in that we've talked about. They have a visible plan and strategy. And they listen to their teams. They manage their data well, and they monitor and adjust when and where is needed and remain kind of flexible into those challenges.
Great. Those are some excellent best practices and tips for companies that are considering this on their cloud journey. So I think we have a few more minutes. And I know, Leslie, you just went through some excellent best practices and tips there, but anything else, Jen, maybe that you would want to share as far as, tips, tricks, what to do, what not to do as companies are embarking on this journey?
Yeah, I would say fail fast. I mean, just do it. Try, learn, check it out. There is so much going on right now and so many areas of growth and possibility. And I think a lot of cloud providers, they come out with daily changes and updates and new services that you can take advantage of. I mean, that's why they have such a huge partner network. There's thousands and thousands of partners out there that are specifically set up just to help companies try out these new services and figure it out. I mean, one strategy in TEKsystems obviously is partners of AWS as some of their top partners, helping companies just try out these new services and figure it out. Those kind of consulting partners are the ones who are the expertise that let you experiment. And honestly, the biggest thing is just focusing on your business and let the cloud providers focus on maintaining, running data centers, making sure all the updates and the patches go through. Those are things that aren't specific to your business. And so let the experts do that and focus specifically on what makes you the expert in your space. And honestly, automate everything. If it's not necessary for you to manually be doing it, have someone else do it or set up an automated process that makes it so it's not on your hands so that you can focus on the things that need your attention and need your energy. And honestly, if it's not automated, it's not done. Those repeatable business practices and processes that just keep going over and over again, you can automate it, you can grow and focus everything else in the area that's letting you become the leader in your marketplace instead.
Excellent. Leslie, anything else you want to add there?
No, the only thing I was thinking we hadn't hit on is just the over communication. So Jen, you had mentioned documenting everything. And, I think here, communicate, and communicate again. We've talked about that why. Keep it simple. As you hit bumps, talk about it, communicate where you're going, lessons learned, and just keep communicating with your teams.
Always good advice. So we have some audience questions here, just a few for our last couple minutes. Leslie, I'm going to direct this one to you. It says, You talked a bit about scaling a remote workforce. So any thoughts you have on the long-term mental health impacts of having a largely remote team?
That is a good question. In today's dynamic of COVID and a majority of teams being remote, there is definitely the mental health component as your teams are adapting to new ways of work. And how do they connect professionally, socially with each other, and juggling the difficult challenges that a lot of us are facing on the home front. And I think the biggest thing that companies and leaders can do is lead with empathy. Talk to your teams about their homes and their work situation. What do they have children or parents they are caring for that the current pandemic is causing constraints for them? And how, as their leader, can you support them in that and support their success? Listen to your team, observe how they're reacting and feeling, and how you can support them. I would say also, encourage, mind, body, purpose with your teams, and as leaders, create opportunities for your virtual team members and your virtual employees to pause and reflect and encourage those healthy habits, as simple as they are, of getting enough sleep and developing that sense of team and purpose together. I know, Jen, you've been remote for years and virtual at One Strategy. This is not new for you. Anything you'd add?
Yeah, One Strategy has always been a remote company, which we love it, but it has so many struggles as well. Some of the biggest things that we have really embraced over the years, and even more so during the pandemic, has been just an open communication. We use Slack as one of our main tools, and we have channels for everything that you would typically chit-chat in your office. There's ones where people post their new baby pictures. There's one where people post their new cat pictures, and memes, and all those sort of things that you usually laugh about with your coworkers, water cooler moments. A lot of our teams actually have water cooler on Friday where they all just log in and they're not allowed to chat about work. They're just allowed to chat about what's going on for the weekend or the upcoming holidays or parties or anything that you're kind of doing on that. And it's been a really great way to just have that same sort of normalcy that you would have when you see a friend or a coworker in person, and bringing that into a kind of virtual space. And it's been really great to have just a ability to chit chat and to have that same sort of personal connection has been incredibly important to making it feel like an actual workplace instead of just a bunch of individuals sitting in their own personal offices doing work in their own silos.
Normalcy. What a concept. So Jen, I'm going to direct this question to you because it's a little more technical. It says, my organization has a single private cloud provider. I know this is a broad question, but through the eyes of a service provider, what types of questions should I be asking as we evaluate potential new cloud providers?
Yeah, I think the first is understand what exactly are you looking for? Obviously, what are you wanting to move? How much do you have? What dependencies you have? And ask those questions if that's sustainable in whatever the cloud providers have. Do you have third-party tools that you absolutely must have and they need to integrate into these new providers or need to be able to be safely set up in that environment? Does it have the same sort of requirements that you have? If you have very strict PII or PCI information and anything on that, do you meet the standards that you need if you have to go through an audit on your side that's more specific to your business? And a lot of the cloud providers really do have some phenomenal capabilities, especially in the GovCloud space if you're in public sector, and they meet a lot of these requirements by default, but it's always good to understand what you specifically need for your business and being able to ask those questions up front. Because there's a lot of times you'll get in and forget, I use this one specific tool. I thought everybody used it, but maybe they're not compatible. And so figure out what's really important for your business to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I would add as well to that around, asking questions around what type of adoption and training program that they provide for your teams so that you have the support to bring your people along as well on that journey.
Excellent. Another question we have is around technical debt. Can you talk a little bit more about technical debt? What is it, and how can my organization overcome it?
Yeah, technical debt obviously is kind of the implied cost of how much work you would have to do to either rework or move or change or adopt any sort of new solution. And so a lot of that addressing, obviously, if you've invested so much of the history of your company into data centers or colos or whatever, that any sort of moving out of it is going to be the technical debt of having to migrate and that rework that your team's going to have to do to put it into a new environment. And so honestly, some of the biggest roadblocks for companies is that time commitment for being able to do the work or the expertise of adopting a new service. And so, Leslie has touched base so well on just the training and capabilities for team members to be able to even understand the new services, but also a lot of the time and rework to build it up. And so that one is some of the biggest roadblocks, but there is so many different avenues for education or even consulting or staffing or support to actually do that. There's tons of expertise out there. One strategy specifically helps customers migrate and be able to set up that infrastructure in a way that's very sustainable for them. TEKsystems, with Leslie's team being one of the first Amazon training partners that are able to do consulting services and training together for their customers to be able to not only help set them up, but then they get to maintain it on their own and aren't dependent on companies to maintain their own infrastructure, which I'm sure, Leslie, you have tons of information and understanding on that kind of side where a lot of companies are overcoming that technical debt, but then what?
Yeah, and I think it's really the skill development for your teams and your people to be able to carry that and take that forward. We see a lot of organizations when we talked about competencies earlier, they'll kind of look at those competencies and they may be process, frameworks, Scrum, Agile. Then there'll be very technical skills. So it might be, Python or Java language training or something specific to that stack or area that they're working in. Automation is another competency that we see organizations putting a lot in from a skill development perspective. And then the human skills, soft skills, power skills, whatever you want to call them. We don't want to forget that piece of that around how teams are collaborating, how are they problem solving, and depending on where the depth of the team is, and your plans will vary and how you build out the competencies and training programs to support any major adoption. But I think thinking through that and planning for that is really critical to an organization's success as they mature.
Right. Another one for Jen. When you talked about lifting and shifting to the cloud, do you have suggestions on who needs to be in the room when making the decisions about that and about legacy systems?
Yeah, obviously the more people you put in the room, the more voices and the more sides of that, but honestly, it's the key stakeholders and owners of the existing infrastructure and the ones that are going to be implementing and maintaining it in the future are some of the key people to have in the room. So having, obviously, the technical stakeholders, the ones who have to do the work, the ones who have to know how the original was built and where you're moving, but also the business owners who are setting the, okay, what is our goals, what is our future, that buy-in. And obviously the person who's going to own your budget. If they're not in the room, you're not going to get anything on that side. And so those I know are some of the most important people to be understanding is honestly the ones who have to do it they're going to have the voices, the ones that stand up to say, hey, if you do this, you break this, sort of ones on your infrastructure.
Right. Finally, last question. You mentioned starting from scratch. What do we need to consider? I'm assuming that means the organization needs to consider before going that route.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's never like completely starting from scratch of being, you always have your current infrastructure, current one, but when you move into new services, it's the same thing. Like if you kind of just like lift and shift an old car engine into a new hybrid car, it's still that old car engine. You're not getting any new benefits. You're just moving it into a new place. That's cool. It looks pretty, but it's not actually functioning that great. So a lot of the ones is just kind of figuring out, one, where are you moving to and what are the benefits and how to kind of transform. And transformation is one of the biggest things that you can do to take and accommodate for some of the biggest benefits they have in the cloud services and digital transformation, so that you are, yes, you're kind of restarting, but you're not restarting your business. You're just refactoring and transforming your infrastructure into something that works with modern day cloud services versus your data centers or whatever infrastructure you have currently.
Yeah, and I would add, train your teams early, and experiment, ensuring that whatever training or adoption or skill development programs that you put in place, they're contextual to that team, and, kind of goes above and beyond what, how to use the technology, and provides that kind of big picture of where the organization wants to go and what they're investing in with some of these new tools, or, moving into the cloud. That way you're kind of not just focusing on the skills they need, but building their confidence and belief in kind of what that new system or tool is going to bring to them individually, and how to help them make it and do their jobs better.
I noticed that there was a question in the Q&A about cloud security issues and what companies are doing to combat and mitigate those risks. I would say some of the biggest concerns right now, I mean, we've heard about them all over, with Zoom calls not having some security, and people were accidentally joining the wrong calls, and infrastructure on that. A lot of it just setting up when you're looking into cloud security is just access. Be very intentional about least access and setting up secrets. And I know specifically AWS has a lot of like setting up CloudWatch by default, and CloudTrail and different services that are able to track, like if you make changes or if someone accesses things, you are able to go back and look at this, but also it identifies those gaps that you have. If you leave like an S3 bucket unprotected, or if you deploy anything without all the security features aligning with what you need for a business need. And so there are a lot of companies right now that are just going back to the basics and making sure that least access is set up, and obviously the like multi-factor authentication and all of that on that side is really where we need to go back to, is just making sure you are being very intentional on that side. And there's either directly through AWS or through their partners, you can do well-architected best practice reviews with them, where they go through and they analyze all of the best practice that you implement. Specifically, one of the areas is in security, and that one, they will go through each one of those, which is phenomenal. And it's not just on services that are already deployed. You can do it through areas you're looking to design and deploy soon. And so that one's really great. You can reach out either to AWS or OneStrategy and TEKsystems does them on behalf of AWS. A lot of other partners also offer this as well, and it gives a really simplified, I wouldn't say audit, but like a very intense interview on setting up for best practices when it comes to security.
All right. Well, thank you both so much for your time and your insight here. This is incredible. And I want to thank everyone in the audience for attending today. Just a quick reminder before you leave, make sure that you take that survey that's going to pop up for you, please. And again, we will be sharing the recording shortly after this ends. So thank you very much, and have a great day.